Hello everyone, and welcome to my class on the Mosque-Cathedral of Cordoba. My name is Pengelly, and the official title of the Mosque-Cathedral of Cordoba, which is also commonly called the Mezquita, is the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Assumption. So, just a little bit about me. I do have a background in history and art history, and as well as exhibition design. And people always ask me, what's an armature? And it's a AOA level of award. Now, what to expect of this presentation is I'm going to talk about some of the history and context of the building. We'll look at some images. Wikimedia Commons is great for finding images. If you haven't used it before, I would definitely recommend. If we're doing this class live, I always recommend asking questions during it. But this is a recording, so that won't be happening. If you do like what you're seeing, please take a look at some of the other videos that I'll be making in the upcoming months for various SCA events. When we did this live with the Colegio, Lady Shazada was my lovely moderator, but unfortunately could not be here tonight for this recording. So some things about the Mezquita. It's been part of the UNESCO World Heritage List since 1984, and this actually is part of the entire historic area is part of that UNESCO World Heritage List. It's not just the building itself and the grounds. It gets 1.5 million tourists a year. It's maybe the largest mosque in the world. I need to confirm that. There's some different contention points on that one. It's 24,000 square meters, and it's still an active religious site. So if you went to go to see it, you would, as a visitor, you would not see it on Sunday because they'd be holding Mass. So a little bit about Cordoba is it is down here. You see my mouse on the southern region of Spain, and originally it was existed, during the Roman Empire. And at the time, it was actually called Cordoba, and it was the capital of the southern region of Baetica, which is partially because, you can see it's on a river, it's very accessible, and just things to keep in mind is that by the end of the 4th century, Christianity was thoroughly established and legalized here. In around the 600s, the Visigoths started to get, really inhabiting the area, making it their own. And then by the time that 750 comes around, that's when the Umayyad Emir Abd al-Rahman reaches Al-Andalus. So he's in this area, and they're definitely in Cordoba by 775. So that is absolutely known. The city is, is extremely historic just based on where it is. It has a whole lot of different cultures part of it, which you really see from, when we're going to look at with the Mezquita. And it's kind of considered an obligatory passage between the south and the Meseta, which is an important port from which mining and other agricultural products from the mountains and countrysides really come out of. And we're also going to take a look at the historic city map in a moment as well, but you can kind of get a look at how grand the building is. You can see some flying buttresses coming off of the main building here. You see it's been built up over the years. And here we have the solid buttresses, and this, again, it's surrounded by the historic city. We have the bell tower as well as the courtyard. There's fountains. It's really a lovely spot. And so as you see here, the historic area here's the Mezquita right here. The historic area does include the old bridge crossing over the river. It's quite large, and it's really helped preserve the character of the building, to have it around a historic center rather than having larger modern buildings built up around it. Now, The site itself has been very much debated over the years. There's definitely a Visigoth Church of St. Vincent there, which, you can literally see them from the ruins. And there's a myth that up until 785, both the Christians and the Muslims used the space for worship. And then theoretically, in 785, the Umayyad Emir, Abd al-Rahman Ibn Muawiyah, tears down what was there and then builds the mosque. It makes for a really good story. Is it actually true? We're not sure. But there's been a lot of myths about the site. There's academic Nuha and Kori who who quotes a very questionable 1968 source saying that, oh yeah, like the Islamification of this area was prophesied by the prophet. No one else really ever talks about this prophecy, and Corey also talks about how there's a myth that Solomon also prophesied the building of the mosque on the exact site here in Cordoba, and it's Corey quotes al-Makari from Naft al-Tib, and he has been known to, and he died in 1631, but he has been known to mistranslate and misremember things, and especially when that's then going through S.M. Imamuddin's book, Muslim Spain, 711 to 1492 AD, a sociological study, which is where Corey is getting the information from. It's like, oh, well, this is the site that Solomon was prophesizing right here in Cordoba, but it's very vague, and it could be mistranslated or misremembered, and the real question is, like, how much you want to believe, especially because al-Makari would often get confused, again, as I said, in quoting some of his sources, and he didn't have all of them with him in 1631. He consulted them in Algeria, and then he was writing his book in Damascus. So memories get fuzzy. So was there actually prophecies for the site? We're not sure. For the Roman temple to Janus, that is, again, unconfirmed, but talking about Damascus, there's a lot of parallels between Cordoba and Damascus has a Roman temple. And, in Cordoba, they're trying to say, like, oh, we're just as good as Damascus. We also had a Roman temple. So it's not necessarily confirmed, whereas the one in Damascus, it's literally, the ruins are still there. In Cordoba, there are Roman and Visigoth materials that are reused in making the building, but whether there was actually a Roman temple there, we're not sure. But the Visigoth church is absolutely there, and we'll take a look at it right here. These are original mosaics from, about the 6th century, and the reason why we know that is because there's an inscription which I was having trouble finding images of, saying ex officina, well, it says ex off Leonti, so it's ex officina Leonti, which says, where the workshop from the materials came from, the dates of the construction is from the 6th century. There's also an epigraph saying, which has the chrismon, which is just a traditional monogram of the name of Christ in Greek. You'll also see here, all these cross patterns in the floor that, we typically think of crosses being more T-shaped, or these are more X-shaped. And there's, these are a lot of similar motifs from Roman and Paleo-Christian traditions, with, a lot of flowers and imagery with a dove and a crown of thorns, which is referring to the Holy Spirit and martyrdom. And there's a lot of ornamentation of intersecting archways, which you can kind of see here. And this is a bit of a better view of some of them, of the mosaics, but again, it's hard to get good images. Visitors aren't allowed down in this space, and you can actually kind of peek up the top here and see that's where the actual floor of the mezquita is. And so walking through the mezquita, you can find that glass floor and look down into it, which is quite something, I'm sure. So the original mosque was made by Abd al-Rahman I. There's no known architect, and this is in 785. The aisles are made perpendicular to the Qibla, and there was originally a sabbat connecting this site to the caliph's palace. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Qibla is the direction of prayer, which is pointing towards Mecca, and in Cordoba, it's more, this is more south-facing, whereas traditionally you get a bit more east-southeast. Part of the difference is that, there's a historic interpretation, which has now been changed in modern times, a hadith of Muhammad, which is where, he says, what is between the east and west is a Qibla. So south is between east and west. And there's also the belief that, the Kaaba at Mecca, is orientated to a couple different historic sites. And so the mezquita here is more running parallel to one of the other walls of the Kaaba. So that they're trying to show the parallel, the similarity, they're aligned with one another, which is again what you're getting from this building being more faced towards the south than the east or southeast, like we see in something built in modern day. So there's some arguments about this being a very Christian basilican floor plan, but Dodds, one of the great art historians who looked into this, has looked into the mezquita, puts out the theory that, they're not using a Christian floor plan. Like, this was, while it was known in the area, they're not trying to Christianize the Muslims or anything like that. It's really just a design choice of like the psychological view, the design impact of having, the aisles and, also the way that things were constructed at the time. This is how things are made. It's, again, very similar to the way that churches at the time are made. But it's absolutely not meant to be directly reminiscent of a Christian church. It's just kind of, this is how things are made. And that's something that parallels with that. Again, talking about the Great Mosque of Damascus, which I'm going to mention several more times, and Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem, where they are built, almost exactly the same with the floor plan. The walls here are built from limestone ashlars, which are basically big square stones, and they're laid using a stretcher and header bond system, so they're very secure. The original floor was formed of a thick layer of mortar over tamped earth, and while you'll see on the roof that it looks like it has a gabled design, it was actually flat on the inside, a flat roof here, which was made out of wooden beams with carved decoration. Now, again, we're just comparing this to the Great Mosque of Damascus, which is built very similarly at the time. The Great Mosque of Damascus was built, about 75 years before the Mezquita. So, again, they're trying to prove that they're just as good here in Spain as they are in Damascus, and they're trying to show a lot of the parallels of, oh, well, they did that, well, we're going to do it too. Like, we're just as good as them. Now, Abd al-Rahman II, expanded, basically due to population growth. He added 8 more new naves to the south. So as I mentioned, all these little dots that you see here are based on columns, which we'll see in photos in a bit. It's a Hippo-style hall, and so the original columns that were used have the capitals, which are the top part of the columns, being in the columns themselves to some extent, are being reused from Roman and Visigoth architecture from the area. Whereas here, you're seeing, the way that you can visually differentiate between the two in the newer section is that there's no base on the columns. They're just straight cylinders down. And there's going to be more expansions over time. The facade of the chapel is finally worked on by Abd al-Rahman III, following. And there was originally a minaret put there by Hisham I, but there's now a new minaret added, and basically on the exact same site. And we're not entirely sure what the minaret made by Hisham I looks like, but we have a good idea of Abd al-Rahman III's, which we'll take a look at later, which had like a square floor plan and two sections. We're also going to look at some of the original facade, and I was checking my notes here, making sure I'm not missing anything. But Hisham's the first minaret that was made was the oldest built in the territory of Al-Andalus, which unfortunately again was destroyed when Abd al-Rahman III made his expansion. So then Al-Hakam II added more entrance archways into the space, and then adds more decorative style, which we're going to see a lot of. There's again even more sections added, and this is when we start seeing skylights in the building. And then Al-Mansur, at the end of the 10th century, expands out a lot to the east because you can't go any more south. There's a river there. There's the story that he takes the bells from the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela, loots it, and melts it down into chandeliers. Now, Al-Mansur, you'll also see his name spelled like Al-Manzor with a Z, and like Z-O-R at the end, and all one word. And he was a very ambitious man. He did a lot to make himself more powerful than the caliph in the area. And this is one of his power moves was, okay, and we're going to add to the mezquita. Now, we'll see here, this is the Patio de los Naranjos, which the oranges, and as I mentioned, the roofs are gabled, but it's going to be flat on the inside, and you can see some of the expansions added to the building roof coming up yonder. And again, as I said, it's right in the middle of the historic center. So, you see here some of the fountains. They were originally used for ablutions. The courtyard was originally not paved. It became paved over time. And you can also see a lot of these little trenches going out from the fountains. And you'll see them also, the trees being attached by them. And that's partially so that way, there's good water movement and very good resource management in this climate for getting water to the trees. So as we're going through these photos, make sure to keep an eye out for them. You can also see here the expansion of adding a ticket booth, because it's a modern, again, you can visit it Monday through Saturday, but not on Sunday for Mass. And we'll take a look closer later, but these are some of the original boards from the original ceiling, which when you have a lot of them, you can just mount them on the inside of the building, even if it's kind of still open to the elements. And again, you can just see how the building has raised over time with the roof. And we'll look at the inside of the section as well for the expansions. So as I mentioned, the building is a hypostyle hall, which basically just means there's a lot of pillars being used. There's over 850 of them, and they're made out of all sorts of interesting and in-depth stone, like very hard stone. There's porphyry, granite, onyx. The things that are very hard to work with, which is why I can imagine that they've been reused from when the Visigoth and Romans had been there. And again, you can tell that these are the newer sections based on the fact that there's no bases on the columns. A lot of the ceilings have this double archway system, which helped literally raises the ceiling, raises the roof to make it taller. And if you can imagine the lights just illuminating upwards, and being a nice warm glow, and then it reflecting off of the cream ceiling back down, it would have helped illuminate the entire space, as well as, again, we have the skylights that were added. Also, in the newer sections where they were unable to get the different colored stone for constructing, they did go ahead and paint the stone to match the original. A lot of the capitals, so the top part of the columns, for the newer sections, are mimicked off of what they found in the old sections, so to help keep it all visually the same. So this is an older section where, you can see here the base on the column, and you can see a reconstruction of the original wooden roof. That being said, the original roof, or wood ceiling, was very ornate. This is a reconstruction here on the right, based off of the original pieces that I showed you briefly on the far wall when we were outside. And so just imagine these extremely ornate ceilings built in, and how, again, the chandeliers with the golden light from the chandelier reflecting upwards off of the metal back down onto the people in the space, and just how that area must have glowed. Again, the Great Mosque of Damascus has done a similar reconstruction in sections, and you can just see how glorious it is. And I use that word, kind of in the religious sense, and awe-inspiring, with the ornate details, and how creating it is with the act of devotion, truly, in my eyes, of how much time you spend and how much detail was put into it, as a testament to the belief. Now, the double archways, you do see a lot in the area. The Merida aqueducts have the same alternating colors, multiple archways to make them taller. And the same thing happens in, again, Damascus. So the mihrab and the mascara are, sorry, I'm just going to take a little drink of water here. So the mihrab of Mesquita dates to 961, which is the expansion of Al-Hakim II. And you can see it a little bit here, but it's a little odd octagonal room, which we don't really know why it was built that way. It wasn't common at the time, but after this, it does become more common in Andalusia, that people are kind of following this new tradition to have a small octagonal room. Now, there's also, we're going to take a closer look at these mosaics that are added. They're done by craftsmen sent by Emperor Nicephorus II, and it's just, again, a testament to the work done, is how detailed it all becomes. So you can see here all of the intricate stonework of the archways, and We call these polylobed arches with the little cutout circles. This is what the ceiling there looks like. Again, it's glowing gold, and what its two flanking ceilings look like as well. Not quite as ornate, but still bringing attention to the ceiling and reflecting light downwards. So this is, the intricate mosaic work that I was mentioning. It's just intense. It's just so much to look at visually, with how much detail went into making these floral motifs and all of the different patterns and colors. This shows a little bit more of the work above in context, and there's a close-up of, more of the stonework and more of the mosaics. Again, another close look at the top of the ceiling here. We have the carved screens, which is what they would call this, to let the light in. And as I mentioned, the original minaret was by Hisham I around 793, 794, and was destroyed. And so the one on the right that you see here was built by Abd al-Rahman III, and the modern bell tower was kind of built right on top of it. So you can see some of the similar, like it was also extended upward and the similar pieces. You can actually see the dome if you're inside the bell tower visiting today. This image here on the right is actually taken from the Archaeological and Ethnographical Museum of Cordoba, which unfortunately doesn't have a robust website. It's very hard to find information there about what things looked like or what is in the collection, what the exhibitions they have, and things of that nature. But I was able to find this image. And that's kind of what the bell tower looks like today, or that is what the bell tower looks like today. So the Villaviciosa Chapel was built in the 13th century after the Christians returned back into Cordoba and take it back over. Now, this is a very basic chapel. Is very plain. They've moved things around in the subsequent years. I believe that these are all on the wall mounted are like older tombstones that were in the floor and have been now mounted on the wall. And this is just a bit of a better photo with better lighting, where you can see the engraving above the polylobed archways. So the chapel was originally built and decorated during the reign of Enrique II in 1372, and it's kind of considered, a combination of the Arab and Moorish plasterwork and some of the themes coming together. And that's, what its ceiling looks like. I always like to look up. I'm a museum lighting designer, so I will always look up. You can see, the wooden ceiling leading up to it. And just imagine making this this intense plasterwork here. It's just insane. And thank goodness to whoever on Wikimedia Commons got this close-up image of this work. I don't even want to think about, I can't even conceptualize how much time it took to do all of it. So there have been Christian editions that have been made over time that we're not going to look too close at. They kind of stuck a church right in the middle of a mosque, which, it always is kind of mind-boggling for me personally, but they did it. As you see, it's very different from the rest of the aesthetics. Again, you saw from the outside the higher ceiling that was done, and you can see the interior of it now. Like, this is where they raised the roof for the altar and the dome. You can also see on the sides here the double archways. And I'm going to go ahead and exit out of my PowerPoint because I want to show you some of the different things that we can also take a look at because we are virtual. So this is the basic homepage, which I've always liked taking a look at, for historic sites because you can learn a lot from them. They teach you, there's input on, when to visit, what to look at, and some of the history of the space. What I particularly like is, they have this page about the building where you can go through, and it's a little bit hard to see on my small screen, but it lets you pan through the different expansions. And, if I wanted to look more into it, I could. It shows you, how things are added over time. So that's just something that I like is, it just shows expansion upon expansion, and you can learn about the history of the different expansions, look at some of the chapels. Most of them are later period, the one we covered in the SCA, and some of them masterpieces there as well. So I do want to take a chance to also use a virtual asset, which is Google Street View, which I always find great to use because it lets you get perspective on the building that you don't necessarily get by just being physically, using pictures from the website. I always find the Google Arts and Culture or Google Street View gives a bit more depth because, it could show you right where it is on the in the city, and it has amazing doors. It's truly what I pulled up this view to show you. I talked about the doors on the east side a little bit earlier and how they were added by al-Rahman to kind of match the doors that were on the west side, and so just very ornate, and there's a lot of them. And you can see it's just right across the street from historic buildings. It's, just an intense amount of things to look at with the different archways, things that have been filled in over time. I'm not really sure when things were filled in, if they were originally windows or what have you. Now, this is one of their most famous doors. It's called, it's very plain, but I hope that you'll still appreciate its history. It's called Door of the Deans. It's one of the oldest doors in the site, and it goes all the way back to the original Mosque of Abd al-Rahman I. And while it has, been built upon and it's been changed a little bit, it's still basically the original form. And Google Street View is kind of cutting off the corner there, but it's built in a kind of traditional Visigoth style, which is that it has, radial carvings of the voicelers, and it, alternates between brick and stone. So that's kind of a testament to the building style. It still works. It's built in the 8th century, and it's still working now. And again, it's just right across the street from like a little bookstore, and they're kind of imitating the same architectural style with the polylobes. And in here, there's unfortunately no real good way to get a full image on this. I've tried many times. This is Door of the Palms. And it was originally called the Blessings Arch, and it's where the blessing of the royal banner used to take place as part of the coronation ritual every year for the new monarch. And Hernan Ruiz I kind of remade this arch, the upper top of this door, in 1533 by adding, the kind of plaster as a relief of the Annunciation, which again, apologies, can't get a good image on it, with a little bit of mythological beasts that you can't really see that are underneath the Annunciation up top. And again, this is on the inside of the patio. This is called the Door of Forgiveness. It's considered one of the most important doors in the ceremonial life of the cathedral. It was completed in 1377, but again has been updated over the years. One of the largest ones it was in 1650 by Sebastian Vidal, and he has these mural paintings, which are contributed to Antonio del Castillo, which represents, Our Lady of the Annunciation, or the Lady of the Assumption, rather. So, again, the cathedral, Our Lady of the Assumption, so very aptly named. And it's, she's flanked by Saint Michael and Saint Raphael. And this goes right on up. The intricate carving just always blows my mind so much. And just right across from, little shops for people to just hang out and come look at it. It's part of their everyday life, which is something we don't really get in the United States. This is the door of St. Catherine, and originally there was a convent nearby, which was the Convent of St. Catherine, which was there in 1268 for sure. And this is where a lot of the main liturgical events took place in the cathedral. Hernan Ruiz II gave it more of a Renaissance look, but it's just been done. The murals are St. Catherine, and then she's flanked by St. Asiclus and St. Victoria. We have another fountain for preparing yourself before going in, and you tell they're doing renovations with when this was captured. So I always appreciate having the screens put up with what you're missing by them doing the work. I also wanted to give you a chance to take a look, if this will allow me, at the bell tower. You can tell by the people in there for scale. This is very tall. It's just a lot to look at. I'm sure it's a lot of stairs. As I mentioned earlier, there's these trenches between the different trees, so that way they can all use water efficiently. You're not losing as much on the courtyard itself. There's a lot kind of connecting. You can see the little tunnel right there between the trees. So that way water's conserved. Again, this is a little ticket booth. You can see all of the original ceiling panels kind of put up against the wall there before you head on in. Again, just one of the fountains. This is inside the Capilla Mayor, which I just wanted to show everyone how it's integrated with the hip-style double archways, just built right on top, right on in it. As someone who works in a museum, my mind is totally blown by the fact that there's duct taping the extension cord down, because that adhesive is going to do terrible things to the floor over time. But I guess when you live in a spot where historic buildings like this aren't as uncommon, you don't think as much about putting adhesive on the ground. So again, this is the original chapel, rebuilt in the 13th century. You can see the polylobed archways, a little remade rose window sort of style here. And right along in here, we're just seeing more of the building. You can see the historic columns with the bases compared to the newer columns without them. And I really do encourage you that if you have time, go take a look in Google Arts and Culture, Google Street View, to see all of it. There is a lot to look at here, and I'm just trying to give you a brief overview. There's a lot of, again, chapel styles to decide. A lot of them are not period appropriate for the SCA. You can see the different chandeliers, which would have reflected light upwards when these were finished with the golden brass. You can see where you can look down into the Visigoth murals. And here you can see a little bit better the Visigoth murals, but it looks like whoever's doing the Google Street View didn't want to get too close with the camera, and I don't blame them. I'm sure it's not quite as even as would be useful for doing the video capture. So in the corners of the Mezquita, they did add these little museum-ish vibes. They have the reconstruction of the ceiling. They have these little cases built in of not light sensitive at all artifacts. This painting is not light sensitive if it's an oil painting on canvas. They built in these little light attics, is what we call them in the museum terminology, for lighting the artwork up close. I'm just doing the basic stone. You can take a look at that. Again, amazing doorways. And so yeah, just right off the side of the Mezquita. Oh, I hit the refresh button too soon. And Mihrab and the Askara, where you can see, it's obviously dated off, but you can see they call these the screens. It's kind of screened by the polylobed archways. You can see the octagonal room along with the engravings. I'm not sure if it's still used as an active site in Islam, but it is, again, as I mentioned, active for Catholic Mass every Sunday. I just like the store, so I'm making you all look at the store with me. I found it very interesting. I know nothing about it, but it's a neat door. I'm sure this is a after period edition with the gold and black and columns. They have little tombstones built into the floor all throughout. And just going on out the exit, they have a small little door on the side there. But this just really gives you a sense of the building and, again, what light would look like if it bounced off of the cream ceilings. We have the skylights that were added to help bring more light into the space. So, thank you all for joining me today. I hope that you found some things interesting, you learned some things, and you are inspired to go look at the Great Mosque of Córdoba in Google Street View and learn more about it yourself. Thanks.